This time we're going to use the one that has 2 darts because I want to have my 2 darts in a different place, and it's just easier to start with the 2 darts where they are. And that one is going to look like this when it's finished. It's going to be 2 parallel French darts. And we're going to slash this one. This is one that we do in the digital pattern making class as well. And it's going to be on the fold, so I'm just going to go ahead and put this up next to the edge. And trace it so I don't have to cut that line. And I'll trace the darts where they are. I'll put in the bust point, but we're not really going to use it like we usually do. Okay, so I'm thinking with my pencil, I want my 2 French darts to come down into here and curve up and be parallel. And because they're going to be parallel, I'm kind of stuck with the distance that I've got right here. But I want to move them each out a little bit. Right now I've got an equal distance between my bust point and the end of the dart. So the distance from here to here and the distance from here to here should be very similar. And I want my space to be a little bit larger. And if we go back and look at this one where I've marked an inch all the way around, as long as I stay within that circle, I don't really want to shorten my darts so that they're that far away from the bust point unless I'm a D cup or a G cup. But I can come a little bit further away because I want the darts to be further apart. So I'm going to move down just a little bit on both of them so I'm the same distance away, but I'm adding ease to my dart. And I now have just a little bit more ease to it right in this section right here. And we'll keep an eye on what happens to that. So now my 2 curved lines are still going to be equally distant from the bust point, but they're further away. I can leave them here if I want to. And if you would rather do that and just draw a curved line here and not move them, that's how close it's going to be, and it's going to look nice. Sometimes I like to just be a little bit different so that you know you can be. So I'm going to draw my actual line. And this is the way I've got it, about 1 3/8 inches apart. So I'm going to use my curve and draw a curved line from the end of the dart, and then I need to have a parallel line, and I can think of that in a couple of different ways. I'm starting on 5 1/8 right here, so if I come up here and I put this on 5 1/8 and I draw my line, is it going to be parallel? And it is. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that line. So when I was planning that, I was careful to make sure that these two lines were parallel to each other. And this is my guess. I moved it down because I was guessing and I wanted the space between these two to be bigger. But if I wanted to play it safe, I could use the pink line instead. But a lot of patterning is using your best guess to get what you think you want. And then you sew it together and see if it works. And it becomes a lot less guessing and a lot more intuition because you will have practiced. So to make this work, and you can use either line, but use the same one on both sides, whichever you decide to do, I am going to leave enough room for seam allowance over here. And then I'm going to cut on my new line. I'm not going to go all the way to the bust point. I'm going to go to the end of the dart point because we've already got our ease set up on the dart. And then I'm going to cut oops. It just has to happen sometimes, doesn't it? And then I'll try not to cut that one off. Okay, so it's still just barely attached. And I'm going to close that. Then I'll close this one. And that was a much easier way of getting a curved dart because I've got my curved lines and I just slashed on them. And I closed the straight one and I opened up the curved one. And now those are going to fit the same way. So if I had done it differently, would it still... Okay, so I have left that little extra bit of ease there. If I had cut on the other line, it would have been straighter and I would have gotten rid of it. So I'm thinking that because I chose to do it this way, maybe I should bump that over there and close that the rest of the way, which means I would need to clip this one and do that same thing. So I still have my ease that I started out with, but I haven't given myself additional ease. And I may have just made a huge mistake, but I doubt it. Okay, so I will fill that in. I like to give you the thought process because if you just wanted to read the book, then you would just read the book and not go to school. But if I was just confusing, go ahead and just cut on the line that I drew as pink. And you can see that right here I missed that little bit, so I'm pushing it over and I'll just put it back on that side. But it was worth doing that way because by putting it on the inside right here, it changes the shape of the outer edge. And I've got the edge I want. Okay, so I need to glue these together first. And when you watch those cool YouTube videos that I like to watch, I post them, or I'll send you to them sometimes. They don't talk or explain things, so I try to make sure you get plenty of that. But they are certainly fun to watch. Shingo Sato, Fifi Style. There we go. Okay, this one's coming to a nice point, and this one I'm just shifting that so it's a nice point too. And this is just the alternate line that you could have cut on so that your lines were closer together. And now that it's in position like this, I need to add seam allowance because you can't sew a curved dart in a way that it's like seam allowance. I mean, like a flap, because it just, you can't sew a curve like that. If there's a flap there, you have to cut out the extra fabric. And then do you see how far back that's coming? That's a little narrow. So where this one ends, where this point comes together, I'm going to draw a line from the end of the point to the end of the point, but I want it to curve a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and use that same ruler, that same curve, flip it over the way I had it, and then I'm going to pivot it from right here where it matches the line, and then I'll just rotate it so I can draw a straight line right there. And now there's equal amounts on both sides. And because this is away from the bust point, I can sew all the way to the end. I don't have to back this off. I'm still going to sew all the way to the point, but I'm going to put a little mark right here so that I don't cut the slit deeper than that, so that it has room to be finished off. So from here to here is going to be the slit, but you're still going to sew to the point. So I'm going to kind of double that part of the line. This is the slit, and that's where you sew to. We'll do the same thing on the other one. But apparently I've got glue on the back of this piece and it's sticky. And as long as you understand what I'm doing, if you just want to zip through that's fine, as long as you understand. But I think I talk slow enough that even on double speed you can understand what I'm saying, so I just sound a little bit more like Minnie Mouse than I usually do. Okay, lining my curve up with the original shape, putting the pencil here, rotating the curve over to the other point, following the curve, and I missed. Go. So I don't want to clip all the way to the point because then the fabric will fray when it gets washed, but I am going to clip from here to here. Maybe I'll do that in a different color. And then add seam allowance. I'll zoom back out because we know me. I learned to cut the width of that line off. Where is it? There's a little bit extra right there. And I cut that apart so that it's the width of the pencil, so that when you're tracing the pattern you can fit your pencil in the width of the slit, but you'll sew all the way to the point. That's when you're using oak tag is when that's most important, but it's easier with paper as well. It's a little bit trickier to cut this other side of the dart and make sure you get the line cut off. This one might be wider and easier to see. It's still attached. And I cut off that extra bit so that your pencil fits right there when you're tracing. Because depending on where you work and how you're cutting things out, it's not uncommon to trace your pieces off with a pen or a fabric pencil and then cut them out. Sometimes that can be more accurate than the way we do it at home, which is to pin the pieces to the fabric or weight them down. Either way, when you do that, when you cut out pieces, you nick the edges of them. And if you're going to be using them repeatedly, if you continue to nick the edges, then they change sizes. So I usually like to trace them onto the fabric in some way. Okay, this one, this is a little bit trickier, but you remember the pre-mitering thing. And this one is going to line up just fine, that first one. But this one has a point on it. So as those line up and come together, you will have just a little tiny bit to cut off. As long as you're careful when you're sewing it, you can probably get away without doing this one because it's small. But you do need to watch that you come right to that point. And when you cut it out, you cut all the way to 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the dart, and you'll put them together and start from the point and sew out to the edge rather than the traditional way of sewing from the edge in. You have to sew from the center out when it's a curved dart like this. At least that's the way I do it. This is cut one on the fold. Center front, fold, curved parallel darts. Don't forget your name, front bodice, cut one on fold, size 8. And then color the rest of the seam allowance.